Super Mario 35 just came out the other day, and I love it. I've been playing this game a ton, and I've been having a huge blast, but one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people seem to struggle. After seeing somebody die on the very first Goomba in every single game that I've played, I figured I'd make a video teaching people some of the basics and more advanced tips you might want to know. So I'm going to get right into it, and here's how to win every time at Super Mario 35. First, the game is not designed for speedrunning, so you don't want to take any of the pipes, and you want to get all the coins and power-ups in time that you can get in every single level. That being said, what a lot of people aren't saying is that there are some times where you're going to still want to speedrun through levels in order to get to the end. 1-3 is a big example that I'll touch on more later. The second big thing is that I've separated the game into three main phases. There's the early game, the sudden death round, which is when there's only 5 people left and it plays that sound cue, and that's when the clock starts going faster. And then the showdown, which is when it's just you and one other person. So the early game is the longest part of the game because that's where everybody really plays, and it only gets to the next part when there's only 5 people left, after 30 people have already died. That's where you're going to want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for that top 5 and showdown points of the game. You are going to need to be good enough at platforming so that you can get yourself to that top 5 point every time. For that, however, you're just going to need platforming skill, which is going to come with experience, and you'll improve over time. Super Mario 35 is all about the resources, which there are 3 main of. The coins, the time, and your power-ups, being mushrooms and fire flowers, as well as stars. And even 1-ups, which can give you 20 coins, which are going to be very important. So for the first main phase of the game, you really just want to get as much time and as many coins as possible. At the very beginning of the game, you start off with very little time, so I always say to prioritize getting time first, and then once you have about 150 to 200 seconds, then you can make sure you're getting every coin in sight. The 3 easy ways to get time are to do consecutive jumping, killing a bunch of enemies with a star, and killing a bunch of enemies with a turtle shell. The shell is going to be the most efficient way of getting time, so whenever you have a shell and a lot of enemies, make sure to use that to your advantage. However, stars are going to be a lot more easy to use because they give you invincibility and they spawn a lot in the first 2 levels. Speaking of the first 2 levels, you're going to be spending a lot of time in these 2 levels because pretty much every game is going to start on 1-1 and then bring you to 1-2. While there are exceptions to that, you're usually going to be able to get to 1-2 at some point in the game, and a lot of times when you hit that flagpole, you'll find yourself going back to 1-1 anyway. This is actually really good for the early game because in 1-1 there's a 1-up mushroom, coin blocks, 3 item pickups, and a star, as well as a lot of easy places in between all of that for getting consecutive jumps on Goombas and Koopas that might have spawned along the way. Making sure to get all the extra fire flowers gives you 15 additional seconds for each grab, so if you walk into 1-1 with a fire flower, just getting the pickups alone will add 45 seconds. And there's also a coin block, which is going to give you a few more coins, a 1-up mushroom, which is guaranteed 20, and then a star right after a long stretch of enemies that can easily spawn and get you up to 150 seconds right after the first run. Assuming you didn't die to the very first Goomba, you're probably going to get to 1-2 after that, and 1-2 is very good because of the warp zone. The warp zone can take you right back to 1-2, which is the only way to confirm where you're going. When you hit any other flagpole, you're going to go to a random stage, which means you could be sent to a Bowser's Castle, which is bad if you're not prepared. The warp zone will allow you to keep repeating 1-2, which means that you're going to be safe through that early game, which is good because you don't really need to be going and sending bad enemies to people, you just need to make sure you're getting yourself time and coins. Which 1-2 is super good for because it has an item pickup right at the beginning, a lot of flat ground for enemies, 2 coin blocks, a 1-up mushroom, and a star. The most efficient strategy by far is to loop through 1-2 as many times as the game will allow you until you have 400 seconds, which is the maximum amount of time you can hold. After that, you really want to make sure you're getting every coin possible. And once you have enough time, you can start going into other levels to do that, like Bowser's Castles, in order to send Bowsers to people, 4-1 in order to send Lakitus and Spinies, or even a water level to send bloopers out at people. As long as you're keeping your time at 400 seconds and not wasting any coins, you're going to be ready for when sudden death hits. When you hear that sound effect, that means that there's only 4 other players and the timer is going to start ticking down faster and faster. And this can be good, because if you already have 400 seconds, you can keep focusing on getting coins and easily stay at maximum time while the clock is pressuring out your opponents. At this point in the game, however, you might start wanting to speedrun certain levels when there's nothing for you. If you get sent to 1-3, it's a pretty bad level for late in the game, because there's a lot of pitfalls, forcing you to take the game slowly. A lot of enemies will walk right off the ledge without you getting a chance to do anything. Not to mention, it's super easy to die here. If you're able to hold yourself well in the sudden death round, you're probably going to win most games. However, there are going to be some times where your opponent is just as good as you. This triggers the showdown, and the clock turns red and you're losing seconds at the max possible rate. When the clock turns red, fireballs are not going to be enough. You're going to have to start using multiple jump combos, big star rushes, or large shell hits. You'll also probably find yourself being starved for enemies because you and your opponent aren't going to be killing nearly as many as you were before. This is when you're going to want to use your huge backup of coins to just keep spamming items. This is good because a POW block can clear your entire screen at once, giving you a lot of time so that way you can quickly move on without getting hurt. You'll be able to comfortably try to jump on as many enemies as possible because if you miss and get hit, you'll always have another mushroom or fire flower waiting in the wings. There's also a chance for you to get a star, which will let you just plow through enemies with a good amount of time. The goal at this point in the game is to just survive as long as possible without even worrying about what your opponent's doing. This is why you want to spend most of the early game prepping for the sudden death and showdown, because it really becomes a battle of resources, and if you have more than your opponents, you're going to be favored to win. The final thing I want to get into is attacking. For this so far, I only really have two strategies, the passive strategy and the active strategy. If you don't really feel like caring about your opponents too much in the early game, just set yourself to attacking, that way you're sending out as many enemies as possible, and you can hopefully knock off some opponents early who get overwhelmed. The other strategy is to actively target people who you see are either in bad situations or on difficult levels. For example, if somebody is in a water level, they're not going to have a lot of trouble dealing with your barrage of enemies. But if you see somebody's in small Mario form on a Bowser's Castle, setting your targeter on them and sending as many enemies as possible is probably going to do them in. However, after everything I've just said, there's really only one thing you need to remember, and that's to have fun. This is an amazing game, and it doesn't look like it's going to be around for a while, so make sure you enjoy it while it's out. Thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. If there's anything that I forgot, leave it down in the comments, and share this video with a friend who can't get over the first Goomba.